maybe not turn in a crazy different direction because this
Right.
has been discussed before. But Keon Coleman, the Florida State wide receiver with the Bucs' first-round pick, that's who you went with. And I got to say, I'm a fan.
Yeah, and the thing with Keon Coleman that's really interesting is the Buccaneers had an interview with him at the Combine. It was a formal interview, and they need another wide receiver now because this Liam Cohen offense is going to be a lot of 11 personnel, which is 3 wide receiver sets and 1 running back and 1 tight end.
Yes.
You're not going to see those 12 and 13 personnel groupings that Dave Canales liked to do. He ran 12 personnel 25% of the time, if my memory serves me correctly. Just to put that in perspective, the LA Rams last year, and you have to remember that Liam Cohen is more LA Rams than he is Seattle Seahawks.
Correct.
There is a connection between the two because Shane Waldron was the former Rams offensive coordinator. He went to Seattle for a couple of years. He's now with the Chicago Bears. He went to Seattle for a couple of years and implemented that offense that Dave Canales learned, and then he brought that offense to Tampa. So a lot of carryover, right, because of the Rams' roots of this offense, but it's going to be more Rams than Seahawks, which means more 3-by-1 sets. That means 3 receivers to one side. That can also mean a tight end, and then 1 receiver or a tight end split out. So what that means is you need another wide receiver, and you have to have a really good wide receiver. Not saying that Trey Palmer can't be that guy,
Right.
but he's not that guy right now. So get another guy to challenge him. And more importantly, with Mike Evans at age 31 in August with a 2-year deal, at some point in time, Mike's not going to be that guy anymore. I'm not going to say when because I'm not going to bet against Mike Evans. But at some point in time, Mike's not going to be that guy. He's not going to be wide receiver 1 anymore. Chris Godwin, this may be his last year in Tampa. So
true, contract year.
It's a contract year. So why not go out there and get Keon Coleman with the first-round pick, right? And so I think that's a logical selection. We have all the picks there you can see, and we'll go down those in just a minute here. We also have roll call coming up in a couple of minutes, so we're going to hit that before we get into the second pick. But that's a little teaser of what's to come. But Matt, the thing with Coleman is they also are bringing him for a top 30 visit. He checks a lot of boxes. He's more athletic coming out of the draft than Mike Evans was, although Evans was a tick faster.
Correct.
But this is a guy that returned punts at Florida State, not just was the alpha receiver there, but his first game at Florida State, you were there, Matt. 3 touchdowns against LSU.
Yeah, it was an incredible game. Way to really hit the ground running with Florida State. He obviously previously played for Michigan State, and the year before he went to FSU, had 58 catches for 798 yards and 8 touchdowns. His first and only season with Florida State. Now, remember, he did miss a couple of games due to injury, so had 50 catches, but had over 600 yards, 58 yards, and 11 touchdowns. So he proved the yard after the catch. And the reason why I really like this is even going back to Tom Brady's last season when Russell Gage was signed.
Yeah,
Russell Gage is wide receiver 3, and just having that important wide receiver 3, it was never as important in those years and even last year compared to what it will be now in the new Liam Cohen offense with what you said about the third wide receiver. The wide receiver 3 hasn't been this important to the Buccaneers offense since really they won the Super Bowl in 2020 and made that run in 2021. Yeah. And part of that too is they just had stacked wide receivers that you had to say, hey, we're going to play all these guys because we had Mike, Chris, and Antonio Brown.
Right.
If they had a lesser wide receiver 3, who knows if they would have used that personnel as much. But I think more than anything else, we've talked about his skill set. We've mentioned him on the show before. He's had a pretty good RAS score as well, where maybe his 40-yard dash wasn't necessarily stellar, but he still brings a lot of athleticism to this game or to his game. But I just look at it a lot more of the Bucs have to set themselves up for potentially Chris Godwin leaving and eventually a smaller decline of Mike Evans. And again, I'm emphasizing smaller decline of Mike Evans because you don't want a double whammy next season where Mike starting to fade a little bit and Chris Godwin's out the door. And then what do you have? And I understand Trey Palmer, there is excitement. There's a lot of excitement, especially about what he did in that playoff game against the Philadelphia Eagles when he had a long catch and run for a touchdown. But also, that was his only catch in the game. So you saw the bright spots, but it's not like he's going in and dominating in performances. The Bucs can't just put all of their eggs, no pun intended, with Easter yesterday, in the Trey Palmer basket. So improving and building depth at wide receiver 3, I think, is absolutely paramount, regardless of how high they are on Trey Palmer or Rakim Jarrett, because it takes one injury, and we saw with Rakim Jarrett. He was on IR for half the season with a hamstring injury. There's got to be option A, B, or C, and even D. And I think Keon Coleman can come in right away, play a little bit of the outside if Chris Godwin comes and moves into the inside, and just brings something similar to the offense that isn't going to completely change the style of it, but also can kind of do some of the yards after the catch that maybe Mike Evans doesn't do as much, or Chris Godwin hasn't done as much since he had that terrible injury a couple of seasons ago. So I think playmaker and yak is really the name of the game for Tampa Bay's offense, with finding a skilled player, and Keon Coleman obviously fits the bill.
Yeah, I agree. 2 last points, and we're going to get to roll call here, right about 30 seconds. But let me make these points real quick. Number 1, Jason Light's first ever draft pick as general manager was Mike Evans, and he already had Vincent Jackson, who was a back-to-back 1,000-yard receiver in Tampa before Evans got there. And if you ask Mike Evans, and we did after his press conference re-signing, I'm like, do you still think about Vincent Jackson? He's like, absolutely. I mean, he played such a huge role in my development. I have to thank that guy, and so to have another big-bodied receiver to learn from, the greatest to ever do it in Tampa, Mike Evans, would be phenomenal experience for Keon Coleman. He's a team-oriented guy. He's a run blocker. He doesn't care about the catches and the yards. He wants to help the team, and he knows he can't go off every game. I mean, I listened to his press conference at the Combine. Says all the right things, and I think that he is a perfect fit for this Bucs locker room. The other thing is, what does Liam Cohen value in a wide receiver? Catch radius.
Yes.
Which guy had the most touchdowns last year? Was it 6'5" Mike Evans, or was it 6'1" Chris Godwin? Right? Which was the guy? It was the 6'5" guy that the 6'1" quarterback could find easily and throw the ball to. So give him another big wide receiver with a big catch radius. And Keon Coleman's a contested catch guy, and I think that you're going to see Baker Mayfield be very, very happy camper. And so I think it would be a great pick if they don't go offensive line or edge in the first round. Boy, this is a really great pick for the Buccaneers. We go into the second round, and we're not addressing offensive line yet. People are freaking out. Western Kentucky wide receiver Malachi Corley. Sorry, he is a draft crush of mine. I've liked this guy for the past 2 seasons, ever since he started his junior season. Just a fantastic player. The thing with Corley is he is more of that slot receiver. He can play a little bit outside, but he was primarily used inside as the slot receiver, caught a ton of screen passes. He can do more than that. But the thing is this guy is the yak king. He is a tackle breaker. He's elusive. He's built like a running back. Matt, you and I saw him at the Senior Bowl.
We did.
And 5'10" and a half, 215 pounds is no joke, right? I mean, he's a legit built guy that I think can be a Chris Godwin type player and really own the slot. He's been likened to Deebo Samuel. And so really what you have in this draft is a 1-2 punch at wide receiver. I know it's a little overkill, but you have to remember Chris Godwin, if the draft pans out this way, not going to be back after next year. He'll be 29 next March.
Correct. And
he's already on the books for $20 million plus this year, because there is some a little bit of inflation with his number this year. But on average, he signed that 3-year, $60 million deal for $20 million. Matt, I don't know if the Buccaneers want to invest $20 million more into a guy like Chris Godwin, who's not as dynamic as Mike Evans, doesn't put the points on the scoreboard like Mike Evans does. This year will be telling, because I don't think they're going to extend him. They're going to see, like they did with Mike Evans last year, they're going to see how Chris Godwin performs in this Liam Cohen offense in the slot to see if he still has it. But you're drafting a couple guys here that are in the pipeline that are on those cheap rookie deals that I don't know if you need Chris Godwin after this year.
Yeah, and that's the brutal part of this business, Scott, is that it's very tough, and the Bucs have done it for a couple of, Mike just got a new contract, but it's very tough in general to have a team that has two $20 million per season wide receivers. And the Bucs are going to be doing that this year with Mike and Chris. And the harsh reality is this isn't Chris Godwin anymore from 2019 and 2020 and really even 2021 up until he got injured. Because if it was the case, if it was the Chris Godwin who put up insane numbers in James's last year, or obviously was a huge focal point of the Super Bowl team, or even up until that torn ACL injury, he was on an insane run of like 3 or 4 games in a row with like over 100 yards. And he was going bonkers as a wide receiver. But the harsh reality is what it's come down to is Chris Godwin just isn't that wide receiver anymore, or he hasn't been over the last 2 years. That doesn't mean he's bad. It doesn't mean that he's a nuisance to this offense. He's still important to the offense. But for the $20 million, if you're able to get Keon Coleman and then Malachi Corley in this second round, unfortunately, Chris Godwin at $20+ million becomes expendable. If it was the old Chris Godwin, you might say, hey, we're going to skip wide receiver in round 2 because we want Chris Godwin for another 2 or 3 seasons if he's playing at that level. But he's just not. So if you go Coleman in round 1, followed by Malachi Corley in round 2, everything I was saying about Coleman, where he has a similar nature to like big catch radius and a guy that can play outside and go down the field. What I enjoy about Corley is that he brings that difference to the Bucs offense that wasn't seen last season, that wasn't able to bring a little extra variety, because there was variety to the Bucs offense, but just something a little bit different that another defense has to account for and go, we don't want him to touch the ball. And I just keep thinking of situations where they did a jet sweep with Devin Tompkins, or they did a screen to Rakim Jarrett, because they would try to get those guys involved when healthy or when in the game. What if Malachi Corley's getting that football in those situations? Mention all the screens that he's getting. If he's the Yak King, it doesn't matter if he's getting the ball 20 yards down the field, 5 yards up the field, or 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Just get him the football, and usually good things happen. And that's the excitement about having so many 3 wide receiver sets, is that you can set up even more creative ways to find him the football. We keep going back to Liam Cohen had Cooper Kupp in his offense, where everybody knew that Cooper Kupp was going to get the football.
That's right.
That's going to be the case for Mike Evans. But what if they also think they're going to create ways to get Malachi Corley the football? I don't know how we're going to stop it. That's a lovely, lovely thing from this Bucs offense.
It is. And you look back at the Rams, they also had another 1,000-yard receiver. You mentioned Cooper Kupp, obviously, but they had another 1,000-yard receiver in Brandon Cooks. They had another 1,000-yard receiver in Robert Woods, right? So the receiver position, very important.
Everybody can eat.
Everybody can eat. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to like kick Mike Evans off the field, but like the guy is getting up there in age. What if you reduced his snap counts, Matt, from 85 to 90% to 80 to 75%, right? And you still didn't have much of a drop off from a team perspective in terms of first downs, yardage, touchdowns, etc. You're just extending the life of your playmaker and probably reducing his risk of injuries as he gets older, right? So I mean, imagine having Chris Godwin in the slot, Malachi Corley playing the flanker spot, and then you've got Keon Coleman at split end, for a couple reps, right? And Mike's chilling on the sidelines. You're still going to get pretty good offensive production. I don't think that Baker Mayfield's going to be complaining, right? And so you're just extending Mike's career a little bit by finding some guys that can take some of that workload off of him. So I think that this would be an interesting 1-2 punch right there for the Buccaneers.